Happy Harvesters, it's Erin and thanks for coming back to the At Homestead for another video. Today I wanted to talk to you about plant support and trellising. I started out in a small garden. My garden is no longer small, but regardless of the size of garden that you have, there are certain types of plants that need trellising and there are certain types of plants that need support. And there are two different things regarding that. Trellising is a lot like what you see here. They're tall and big and you have to train your plants. And support may be just some twine around the plant to give a little extra support once the fruit comes in. So I just wanted to show you what I have in my garden, what's worked for me, and what might work for you. So tomatoes are the most commonly trellised plants, and you probably have had to trellis your tomatoes in the past. They are typically found in the garden centers, or the types of support you can find in the garden centers are those tomato cages. You know the kind that aren't going to support an indeterminate tomato. But the kind that will support a determinate tomato, those cages are implements that every single person knows, and they are useful. They just aren't necessarily useful for indeterminate varieties, which is what I'm growing. So these are trellises for my indeterminate tomatoes. I don't really grow any determinate tomatoes anymore, just because I have the space and I know how to vertical garden. So tomatoes are also a vining plant. If led to its own devices, it would grow across the ground and the fruit would be developed on all of the branches that kind of just weave its way across. So by trellising vining varieties, you cut down on disease and you increase the airflow, which then allows your plants to grow vertically and provide you more fruit. I've also found that when I trellis my plants, they have a tendency to be happier for longer and to provide more food for our family. So if I'm able to cut down on the disease, increase the airflow, and have a happy, healthier plant, I feel like that's something I should do. The plants that I have, like I said, are indeterminate tomato varieties. And as long as I prune and take proper care of the plant, it can grow 10 feet, 12 feet tall. And so I really do have to take care of the plant to be able to get the fruit that I want. So tomatoes are one of those plants I absolutely recommend trellising. The little cages are fine for the smaller varieties, but most varieties are gonna grow pretty big when you take care of them. And different types of plants will require different types of trellising. I'm under another trellis for my fancy gourds, a lot like my tomatoes, and I will have to train them up this trellis. A lot of the vining types that I have are the fancy gourds, the Jack-B Little pumpkins, and the tomatoes. But another really common food that people like to grow are cucumbers. You might ask yourself, well, can't I just grow them the same way I grow the tomatoes? But, or especially if you're using a tomato cage, you can't do that because the cucumber will dwarf that tomato cage in a hot second. Instead, there are these trellises, which you can purchase online. We made ours ourselves. Just added twine and some 1x3s. And this is just an A-frame for cucumbers. My cucumbers are planted at the bottom of the trellis and they will grow up and I will train them upwards. This plant grows so fast in the right conditions that if you tried to get something smaller than a large A-frame, this is about 6 foot tall, you may not be able to keep up. Of course, you can let it just grow across the ground. You can try to keep it up with obelisks or other types of things. We've found that this A-frame really allows for good airflow circulation for cucumbers, and it's a lot easier for us to harvest the cucumbers as well. Which now brings me to my pea trellis. I'm still learning peas. This is only my 3rd year of growing peas. And the first 2 years, I just had a little, maybe foot off the ground trellis, and I never got that many peas. I only planted maybe 6 or 7 plants, and I only got maybe a handful of peas from them. But now, not only am I growing vining variety peas, but I have this big trellis for it to grow up, and I have to say I'm really excited about this. I do come out every day and kind of tuck them in as I go, make sure that they're training, because like the tomatoes, they have to be trained. Like the cucumbers, they have to be trained. But it doesn't take a lot of time, and it's gonna yield me a lot more food for the family. And these are one of those things that like I'm really excited that the kids will be able to just snack on in the garden as well, because getting them not to eat something is a lot harder than it is for me to get them to eat it when we're in the garden. And the last thing that I want to talk about are peppers. This is my pepper bed. As you can tell, I'm kind of a pepperhead. We've got a little bit of everything: jalapenos, Zulus, Zulus, the green and red bell peppers, tangerine dreams, cubanelle, shishitos, you name it, I'm probably growing it. But the peppers will also need help. These are the types of plants that just need extra support for when the fruit comes in. A lot like the gourds or even squash, the fruit themselves is super heavy. And so you want to make sure that you have something that the plant can support itself on once it becomes laden down with fruit. I prune my peppers for production, so I try to give them as much growth as possible, and I try to encourage their growth with pruning early on in the transplant stage. But once we get out here to the garden and they've been established for 2 weeks, I have to let them grow. These plants will be up about this high and they'll be laden with fruit. So I need to make sure what my stakes look like is I'll put a stake here and a stake on the other side of this row, and I'll just run a piece of twine between. And I'll do that in the front, and I'll do that between each row, so that as the peppers grow, and peppers like to hold hands, so as they grow, they're also supported by the twine. So the last thing in the garden that I want to show you that really needs support, that I think is a very popular food that people are growing now, are beans. This is our bean trellis, and yes, it is missing a crossbar, but it rotted last year and we wanted to make sure that it was put in properly, so we still have to do that. There's always a list in April and May to continue to do, but this bean trellis is going to support all of our vining beans. Sorry, there's a bee. Right there is how they train themselves to climb up. I actually don't have to do anything to this variety. They just train themselves, which makes this bean trellis even better. These are the purple potted poles, and they will snake their way up. This is the first time I've been growing slippery silks. These are also supposed to be a vining variety, and I haven't seen any tendrils come off quite yet, but they're still growing. They look good. And of course, my dragon tongues don't really need any type of support, and they're here in the front. So this will be covered completely with beans. And again, we made this ourselves. It's not hard to make. We made them by, I believe, from 1x3s. And we keep them in our shed every winter, and then we put them back out here for the beans. And of course, I couldn't finish a video without talking about my green stalk, because I'm obsessed with it and I think it's the best thing I've ever had so far. But there are also containers that grow vertically, like the green stalk, where you can use this, implement it in your garden, grow things more vertically, which then opens up more prime real estate in your garden beds, which is what I've really been realizing this year with this. It's a bit of an investment, and I can't say how, this is not an ad. I'm not being sponsored for it at all, but this is like one of the best things that we've purchased in a long time. And I'm really excited to be able to open up more planting space in my beds, because I don't have to grow my beets and my radish and my kales and my spinach and my lettuces. I could grow them all in the green stalk. And because it's movable, I can also move it over by Slim Shady in the middle of the summertime and still grow my lettuces, because where I live, if I were to leave it where it is now in full sun, everything's just gonna bolt. By the time July comes around, you can't really grow lettuce here, and my bok choy has already bolted. So I'm excited to be able to have that be an additional vertical place in my garden that I can grow extra things. So I hope that is helpful. Trellising and supporting your plants is really important, especially as the fruit starts to grow and you start to see all of your work and all of your effort over the last few months really start developing into something that you can feed your family with, or a nice snack in the garden, depending on why you're doing this. And so I'm really excited to share all of these different things I'm using in my garden. And like I said, my garden's pretty big now, but it didn't used to be. Any size garden can really take advantage of these vertical ways of growing and be able to produce more food. I hope this helps, and I look forward to seeing you at the next video.